Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, The Francophile Reader. So today I want to talk about my 5 favorite books of 2020. So my 5 favorite books will, as usual, be listed in reverse order. So number 5 will be first, that's my 5th favorite book, and then my most favorite book will be at the very end. So my 5th favorite book is Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, or The Bourgeois Gentleman, by Molière. Molière was a 17th century playwright who performed also for Louis XIV, who was the king, the absolute monarch of France. And he actually played, Molière himself, played the character of Monsieur Jourdain, who is our protagonist. Now, Monsieur Jourdain is a bourgeois, he's a middle-class gentleman. He's someone who has the money, but doesn't necessarily have the style of the aristocrats. And that's what this play is making fun of. Monsieur Jourdain hires all of these dance instructors and music instructors, philosophy teachers, to teach him how to be refined. And he doesn't exactly learn how to behave as an aristocrat. But even while Molière makes fun of those who are not aristocrats as a way of pleasing the nobles who would be attending his plays, he does also make fun of them. And we see that this play is a very sophisticated, layered play. It's one of my favorite plays that Molière ever produced. My favorite, though, is Don Juan, which I also reread in 2020, but I wanted to include this one because I've never included Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme on my favorites list. This year, just as last year, I will be hosting Molière in May. Last year we read 5 of Molière's most famous plays, and this year we'll be reading 4 or 5 plays that we didn't read last year, so you can look forward to that. So that's my 5th favorite book. My 4th favorite book of 2020 is Notre Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo, or The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I made a whole series of videos over a 2-month period on this novel, and I just really loved it. As the French title suggests, this book is primarily about the cathedral. It's about the architecture of the cathedral, and the architecture is a metaphor to explain what Hugo is doing in this novel. The novel itself is a kind of architecture. I was surprised by how morally gray the character of Quasimodo is. And there are also other characters in Notre Dame de Paris that do not feature in the Disney film. Though I did rewatch the Disney film, I really enjoy it. This book is a tragedy, whereas the Disney movie isn't. Yes, there are certain chapters that drag, but I also thought it was very interesting how Hugo interprets the late medieval French justice system. I do hope to read more about Hugo, and maybe someday I will be able to check off my bucket list Les Misérables, which I have never read in either French or English, and it has been on my bucket list for years to read Les Misérables from cover to cover in French. My 3rd favorite book of 2020 is La Belle et la Bête, or The Beauty and the Beast, by Madame de Villeneuve. Madame de Villeneuve lived in the late 17th and the first half of the 18th centuries. This story, this real novella, it's 150 pages at least, is considered the original Beauty and the Beast, and I did a whole live show about this one. I will also link it below. I will link all of the videos that I've made about these books below. The first half of the story is more or less the story that you know based on the Disney movie, but the second half is actually quite different. It's about fairies. So there are a lot of fairies in this story, and the fairies play a huge role. And this book is not just about a woman who falls in love with a beast who then turns out to be a man. It's also a book about social class, and one of the big issues that we have in this story is that Belle ends up with a noble man, and she's not nobility, and so his mother doesn't think that her son should be with her. And so there's a lot of issue with social class. And this issue with social class is also important in the realm of the fairies. I absolutely love this story. It was a lot longer than I expected, seeing that it's a fairy tale, but it was really a page turner, and I highly recommend it. My 2nd favorite book of 2020 is Kaido Retour au Pays Natal by Aimé Césaire. This is a book that I actually never made a video about because I didn't really know how to make a video about it. This is considered the foundational text of the Négritude movement, which was a literary movement of Black liberation, primarily in the Caribbean, and Aimé Césaire was like the leader of this movement. Kaido Retour au Pays Natal is a work of prose poetry, and it recounts the feelings of the author upon returning to Martinique, which is a territory of France, from mainland France. It's about the history of colonization. It's also about race, and he does have some internalized racism that he addresses. This poem is set against the backdrop of the Martinique landscape, and the landscape itself plays a pivotal role in this poem. I think it is absolutely a brilliant poem, and I will read you one of my favorite passages. This comes from the translation by Clayton Eshelman and Annette Smith. I would arrive sleek and young in this land of mine, and I would say to this land whose loam is part of my flesh, I have wandered for a long time, and I am coming back to the deserted hideousness of your shores. I would go to this land of mine, and I would say to it, embrace me without fear. And if all I can do is speak, it is for you I shall speak. And again I would say, my mouth shall be the mouth of those calamities that have no mouth, my voice the freedom of those who break down in the prison holes of despair. And on the way I would say to myself, and above all, my body as well as my soul, beware of assuming the sterile attitude of a spectator, for life is not a spectacle. A sea of miseries is not a proscenium. A man screaming is not a dancing bear. So as you can see, this is a very hard poem to talk about, but if you are interested in post-colonialism, you definitely should read Aimé Césaire. And my favorite book of 2020 was L'amour la fantasia by Assia Djebar. And again, I made a video about this book. L'amour la fantasia is translated Fantasia, an Algerian cavalcade. This novel is structured like a musical fantasia, which is a mixing of different genres of music. And similarly, this novel is a mixture of prose poetry and traditional prose. And it looks at two very major events in Algerian history, the first being the colonization of Algeria by the French in the 1840s, and then the second is about the Algerian Revolution of the 1850s, the 1950s, which ended in 1962, I believe. And the novel particularly focuses on women's experience, women who were involved in these wars and in the resistance efforts in different ways. It's also about the author herself, Assia Djebar, and her growing up as Muslim in pre-revolution, I think it's pre-revolution, and her experience being a woman, being Berber, and also studying in France. And so she deals with all of these different identities. If you're interested, again, in post-colonialism, but also intersectional feminism, I highly recommend this book. I think it is absolutely brilliant. At one point, she deals with accounts of these massacres that occurred in the 19th century, right, in the 1840s, when Algeria was colonized by the French. And she takes these archival records where the leaders of these massacres would actually recount what they did. And she takes them, and while telling their story, she presents it in such a way that it reclaims this history for the Algerians and primarily for Algerian women. I thought this was an amazing book, and I really look forward to reading more by Assia Djebar. So these are my 5 favorite books of 2020. Let me know if you've read any of these, and I'm really looking forward to all the books that I will be reading in 2021. Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.